Welcome, John here. Today we're going to be talking about how to complete the assessment mapping document. I want to start out by just explaining the difference between the assessment matrix and the assessment mapping document. The two are often confused. So an assessment matrix is completed as part of the assessment planning process. If you think back to when we actually were planning for our assessment tool design and development, we finished the plan part A, which is that very sort of almost precursor information that we start collecting in order to start the planning process. So that plan part A, we then go on to complete the assessment matrix. And the assessment matrix and the assessment mapping document, they do look a bit similar because they both contain information that is actually cut and pasted from the Unit of Competency. So things like elements and performance criteria and other information about the unit appears in both documents. Just remember that the assessment matrix is actually a planning document. And so the purpose of it is for us to be able to list all the components of a unit of competency. And if you can see across here where we've got the heading assessments on the right hand side, and you can see here under assessments we've got a whole lot of assessment instruments listed. On the assessment matrix, what we have is we have all the different ways that we can gather evidence listed. And then with the matrix, what we do is we go through and we go line by line and we look at all the possible ways that we could collect evidence for the particular unit component. So for example, if it's a performance criterion, we go through and we list all the possible ways that we can collect evidence. So we continue to do that right throughout the unit. And then we go back and we highlight the best two evidence gathering methods. And so that then tells us or gives us a bit of an idea around how we might move on to develop our assessment tool. So if we're looking to assess performance and assess skill, which we always are, then we're going to have an instrument that allows us to assess performance. So for example, an observation checklist. And then we might have an instrument that allows us to gather knowledge evidence. And so we might have a written question instrument. And so that's the assessment matrix. And then we take that information and then we go on to populate the plan part B. And so the completion of the matrix gives us enough information for us to then be able to move forward and decide the best way for us to approach assessment tool development. And so you can see here that what we've got, it looks a bit similar, but across the top, as I've said, we've got our assessment instruments listed. And then what we've got underneath is we've populated how this all looks. So for example, if we look here at performance criterion 1.2, and you can see that it's covered in assessment instrument evidence to third-party report. And you can see that it's listed here and it's covered in that particular assessment instrument in tasks 5 and 6. So one of the things that we see with the completion of assessment mapping is that rather than putting enough detail in so that the person who's looking at the mapping document can find exactly where in the instrument the particular unit component is covered, we get people popping an X in there, so putting an X in the box. And we need to have more information. So think battleships, think coordinates. So we really need to be able to know where in each assessment instrument the particular performance criterion is covered. And so I'm just going to walk you through this a little bit so you can see how this goes. So the first thing, or the first part of completing the assessment mapping, is that we complete the performance, the elements in the performance criteria. And you can see here that we've done that. And so we move on to the performance evidence. So we are making sure that we go through all the components of the unit. You can see that on the left-hand side, we've listed the performance evidence, popped it in dot points. You can see here, I'll just highlight it, you can see here that all the assessment instruments remain the same. And so what we're doing is we're going through for each of the unit components, and so a component is here. The component here is this particular piece of performance evidence. And you can see that this is covered in evidence to third-party report by tasks 7 and 8. There's also evidence 8, which is a video recording, and it's covered in observation 6, and it's covered in evidence 9, which is a knowledge questions instrument, questions 13, 14, 16, and 17. Once again, there's enough detail here so that the person who's looking at this mapping document can go to the instrument and find particularly where it's mapped, and then they can check that mapping. So far, we've done our performance criteria, we've done our performance evidence. It's the same deal with the knowledge evidence. So I'm just whizzing through this. The knowledge evidence, you can see that once again, our assessment instruments remain the same. We've just cut and pasted the knowledge evidence in here. And you can see here that once again, the mapping process is the same. And you'll note here that we've got knowledge evidence. So we're not going to be necessarily looking so much at observation for knowledge. We're going to be thinking more about perhaps questions, written questions, verbal questions, or some type of supplementary evidence. And you can see here that housekeeping standards, the knowledge evidence relating to that is under evidence 2, third-party report. You can see it's tasks 7 and 8. And over here, evidence and video recording, you can see that observation 6. So what they're saying here is that demonstration of housekeeping standards does contribute to someone demonstrating their underpinning knowledge. Evidence 9 is also covers it, knowledge questions, questions 13, 14, 16, and 17. So if you think about this, so far we've done performance criteria, performance evidence, knowledge evidence. We list our assessment conditions here. We also, if we scroll down, we also list our foundation skills. Once again, the assessment instruments do not change. The foundation skills are listed to the left. With foundation skills, if you are using a new streamlined unit of competency, the foundation skills may be listed in a table and they may be already identified for you. So then it's just a matter of cutting and pasting it from the foundation skills table and then running through this process once again of looking where each of those is covered. And you can see here evidence to third-party report tasks 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 11. It's also covered, the foundation skill of reading is also covered under evidence 4, housekeeping procedures ×2, and away we go along here. So this unit of competency, the foundation skills in this unit are not listed in a table. It has the statement, foundation skills essential to performance are explicit in the performance criteria of this unit of competency. So that means you need to go through and you need to identify the foundation skills and then you need to map them. And so you can see here that what we've got is we've got our foundation skills have been identified, and there's also been a summary of how those foundation skills occur in the unit of competency. So if the table's there, you're good to go, you cut and paste. If the table's not there, you go through and you find your foundation skills. And just be aware too that the foundation skill process of finding them, if they're explicit, is not an exacting science. So different people will do it slightly differently. If you're really familiar with the unit of competency, you'll be able to nail the foundation skills. So if you can't, that's okay. Still go through the process and just identify what you can. So we've gone through and you can see the foundation skills mapping is the same. It's the same process. And then if we scroll down, you can see here that we've got dimensions of competency. And the same process happens. You've got your task skills, your task management skills, your contingency management skills, and your job role environment skills. And you can see here that detail has been added in terms of each of the dimensions of competency. And then once again, they are mapped across in the same way that the other unit components are mapped. So I'm going to take you through the process quickly of how to actually populate the mapping document. So I've pulled up a blank assessment mapping document. I've also on the training.gov.au website found my unit of competency, which is conduct housekeeping activities. Code is TLIF1002. And what I've done is with the streamline units of competency, if you look under the content section, they actually have the unit of competency in 2 Word documents. So a really good tip is to download the Word documents, and then you're able to cut and paste away to your heart's content without getting yourself in too much of a pickle. So what we do is we start cutting and pasting and populating the document. So I'll put the unit code in there. We put the unit title in under here. And then we put the first element, which is this one here, number 1. So that goes here. Then we put our first performance criteria, goes in there. Our second performance criterion. And I'm just going to pause this and populate the rest of this. So using magic, I've gone through and I've populated the assessment mapping document with the elements and performance criteria from the unit. The next step is that you go through and you list your assessment instruments in the top, in these columns here to the right. So you can see that we've got evidence 1, which is the CV, evidence 2, which is the third-party report, evidence 3, statement of attainment. I'm just going to go through and finish these. So now you've got your assessment instruments all listed there, and then it's just a matter of going through and actually performing the mapping exercise. So I've just jumped back to our completed assessment mapping, and so you can see how we've completed this. It's the same as I explained at the start of the video. So look, I hope this has been really helpful, and I hope that you can get a bit out of the video, and you might want to actually just do part of it, then stop and go and have a look or have a go yourself, and then come back to it later on. And you should be able to work your way through it. Good luck.